Level 1. The note in your hand. You are 31, and you are holding a banknote up to a window, and for the first time in your life you are actually looking at it. A note is a thing you glance at for a quarter of a second and hand over. It is the most familiar object you own, and the one you have examined the least. Because here is the thing you have just realized. A banknote is not a picture of money. It is a security document that happens to be printed. The image on the front, the face, the building, the numbers, is the easy part, the decorative part, the part a child could copy. The value is not in the image at all. The value is in a stack of physical features that were deliberately made hard to reproduce, and every one of them is a separate problem you will have to solve, or fake, or skip and hope nobody checks. That is the mistake that catches almost everyone at the very start. They think counterfeiting is a printing problem. It is not. Printing the picture is the first afternoon. Everything real about the note, what it is made of, how it feels, what it does under a light, what hides inside the paper, is the rest of your life. So you now understand what you are attempting. You are not copying a design. You are trying to manufacture trust, one note at a time, in a factory built by a state specifically to stop you. That is the lesson of level 1. The counterfeit is not the image on the note. It is everything the state added to the note precisely so that the image would not be enough. Level 2. The paper. You have a beautiful printed image, and it is worthless because it is printed on paper. This is the wall that stops the largest number of people, and it stops them immediately. The material a real note is made of is not sold to you. It is not the paper in your printer, and it is not the paper in any shop. Most currencies are printed on a specific blend of cotton and linen fiber with no wood pulp in it at all, which is why a real note does not go soft when it is wet and does not feel like a page. Others have moved to polymer, a thin plastic film with a clear window designed into it, precisely because plastic is even harder to source and copy than the cloth was. And the reason this matters is not that the paper looks different, it is that the paper announces itself. The cheap detector pen that a shop assistant drags across a note is not testing the ink or the picture. It is testing for wood pulp. It reacts to the starch in ordinary paper and stays clear on the real cotton blend. So, an amateur who has perfected the image has built something that fails the single most common test in the world the instant a bored cashier touches it, with a pen that costs less than the note. So, your real problem at this level is supply. You need a substrate that behaves like the genuine one, and the genuine one is manufactured under guard in tiny numbers of mills on machines you cannot buy, for customers who are only ever governments. That is the lesson of level 2. The forger's true enemy is not the artwork and not the ink. It is a sheet of specialist cloth that the state made certain you could never legally hold. Level 3. The press. Now you have to make the note, and you discover that even the printing is not the printing you know. Ordinary money, the kind on a flyer, a magazine, a cereal box, is made by pressing ink flatly onto a surface. A real banknote is not. The main design is made by intaglio, a process in which the image is engraved into a metal plate as grooves. The grooves are filled with ink, and the paper is pressed into them under enormous pressure so that the ink stands up off the surface. That is why a genuine note has a texture you can feel with a fingernail, the raised lines of a collar, a number, a portrait. It is not printed on the paper, it is pressed into it, in relief. You cannot do that on any machine you can casually acquire. An intaglio press is a heavy, specialist, controlled piece of industrial equipment, and owning one is itself a flag, so you simulate. You use the best flat printing you can, high-resolution offset layered carefully, and you accept that it will look right and feel wrong. Because the one thing flat printing can never fake is depth. A person who knows to run a thumb across the note will feel a smoothness that should not be there. And there's the fine detail most people have never noticed exists. The tangles of hairline patterns, the lines so thin they blur into a color, the tiny lettering hidden along a border that only becomes words under a lens. That microprinting is not decoration. It is a trap, laid specifically so that a copy of a copy turns those crisp lines into a gray smudge, and a smudge under a magnifier is a confession. That is the lesson of level 3. Real money is not printed onto paper. It is pressed into it in a way you can feel by a machine you cannot own, and the flatness of your version is a fingerprint you cannot wipe off. Level 4. The features. Here is where the state was actually thinking about you, and you have to answer every idea it had. Hold a genuine note to the light, and a face or a shape appears inside the paper itself, the watermark, made not by printing, but by varying the thickness of the paper while it is still wet, so the image is in the material and cannot be added afterwards. Run your eye down it, and there is a thin line woven through the paper, appearing and disappearing, sometimes with lettering on it, sometimes shifting color. The security thread, embedded during manufacture, not laid on top. Tilt the note and a patch changes color, or an image moves, or a hologram flares. Put it under ultraviolet and a pattern glows that is invisible in daylight, while the paper around it stays dark, because real currency paper is made not to react to UV, and ordinary paper is made bright white with the exact chemicals that light up. You cannot make any of these things. What you can do is imitate the look of them well enough to survive the way people actually check, which is badly, quickly, and in poor light. You print a pale gray shape where the watermark should be, and hope it is never held to a window. You lay a printed line or a strip of foil where the thread should be, and hope no one looks at whether it is inside the paper or stuck to it. You glue on a shiny patch that flashes like a hologram to a glance, and is obviously flat to a tilt. Every one of these is a gamble that the person taking the note will do the fast check and not the slow one. The danger is not the public. It is the one bank teller, the one trained cashier, the one machine that does the slow check every single time without getting bored. That is the lesson of level 4. You are not reproducing the security features. You are counterfeiting the inspection, betting that the note will only ever be glanced at, and building it to survive exactly that and nothing more. Level 5. The passer. The passer. The notes exist. Now somebody has to turn them into money, and that is a different skill entirely, and it is the one that gets people arrested. Because a counterfeit note is worth nothing sitting in a drawer. It only becomes value at the moment it is handed to a real person in exchange for real things. And that moment is the most dangerous act in the whole operation. Everything before it is a workshop. This is the front line. So you learn the craft of passing, and almost all of it is about avoiding examination. You never spend a fake where it will be studied. You choose a busy till at a busy hour, a tired assistant, a dim bar, a crowded market, a moment of distraction you create yourself. You favor the smaller denominations, not the large ones, because a large note gets held up to the light as a reflex, and a small one gets dropped into the drawer without a glance. And here is the part that people miss about what you are actually stealing. You are not really buying the coffee. You buy something cheap with a fake note, and what you walk out with is the change, real money given to you in good faith, in exchange for a piece of paper that cost you pennies. The genuine notes in your pocket are the product. The purchase is just the machine that converts your fake into somebody else's real. Which means the loss never lands on a bank. The counterfeit travels until it reaches someone who checks, and that person eats the entire loss, and that person is almost never rich. That is the lesson of level 5. The forgery is not spent. It is used as a machine for extracting genuine change, and the cost of it falls not on the state you defrauded, but on the last ordinary person, careless or trusting enough to accept it. Level 6. The distributor. You have realized the passing is where the risk is, so you stop doing it. This is the same move every ladder in this series reaches eventually. You separate yourself from the dangerous end. You no longer walk into shops with fakes in your pocket. Instead, you print in volume and you sell the notes wholesale to other people who will take that risk for you. Passers, small dealers, anyone willing to do the exposed work of putting paper into tills. And you sell them for a fraction of their face value. That fraction is the whole economics of the trade. A buyer hands you real money and receives a larger number in fakes, and then it is his job and his exposure to turn that larger number into spendable cash, one careful transaction at a time. You have converted your risk into his and taken your profit up front in clean money before a single note has been passed. You have also discovered the thing that makes this genuinely profitable, which is that the cost is almost all fixed. The plates, the substrate, the press, the features, the hard, expensive, dangerous work is done once. After that, printing the 10,000th note costs almost exactly the same as printing the 11,000th, which is nearly nothing. So every note you sell beyond your setup is close to pure margin, and the entire pressure of the business is to print more and to find more mouths to feed them into, which is also the moment you lose control of your own work. Your notes are now in the hands of people you do not know, being passed in ways you did not choose, in places you have never been. Your exposure is no longer your own carelessness. It is theirs. One sloppy passer, caught with a bad note and frightened, is a thread that leads back up the chain to you. That is the lesson of level 6. The moment you became a supplier instead of a spender, you traded the risk of the till for a different risk, that your product is now out in the world attached to every stranger foolish enough to carry it. Level 7. The network. The work has moved, the way all of this has moved, off the street and onto a screen. You no longer need to meet a buyer in a car park. You need a listing. Somewhere in the hidden corners of the internet, there are marketplaces where counterfeit notes are sold like anything else is sold, by vendors with ratings and reviews, shipped in the ordinary post inside a birthday card or a magazine, paid for in cryptocurrency, delivered by the same carrier that brings a parcel to any door. The buyer and the printer never meet and never learn each other's real names. And a whole gray layer has grown up around this to muddy it. There is a legitimate business in what is called prop money, imitation notes made for films, for music videos, for training, printed deliberately to be obviously fake so that no one could spend them. It exists lawfully, and it also provides perfect cover because a seized parcel of fakes or a listing full of them can always be described as novelty items, film props, a joke, a collectible, right up until the moment the notes turn out to be good enough to pass. The line between a legal prop and an illegal forgery is not the object. It is what you intended it to do. But the screen that gave you reach also gave you a permanent record. The marketplace has logs. The cryptocurrency you were told was anonymous is a public ledger that never forgets and that an entire industry now exists to read. The parcel has a route, a postmark, a chain of handling. You have swapped the risk of being seen in person for the risk of being read later, off a record you cannot destroy because it was never yours to begin with. That is the lesson of level 7. Moving the trade online did not make it safer. It made it reachable, and it made every transaction a line in a file that outlives the deal by years. Level 8. The state. Above everything you have built, doing it better than you ever could, is a government. Because the finest counterfeit notes ever made were not made by criminals. They were made by states, deliberately, as a weapon. A country that wants to hurt another country's economy or fund something it cannot fund openly has something no forger in a workshop will ever have: a real national mint, real intaglio presses, real currency-grade materials, and engineers who do this lawfully for their own money and can be turned to doing it for someone else's. The results are notes so good, they earn their own name in the trade. The kind of forgery that passes not just the tired cashier, but the brained examiner, the counting machine, sometimes even the issuing bank's own first inspection. Made on the same class of equipment as the real note, the features you spent this whole video failing to imitate are no longer imitated. They are simply made, properly, by the only kind of body that has them. And the purpose is not a shopkeeper's change. At this level, the note is not a way to steal a coffee. It is a way to move real value across a border that is closed to you, to pay for things you are sanctioned out of buying, or simply to push enough convincing paper into an enemy's economy to make its own citizens stop trusting their own money. That is the real damage of counterfeiting at scale, and it has nothing to do with any one transaction. It is the trust itself that is the target. That is the lesson of level 8. The best counterfeiter in the world is not a criminal with a press. It is a government with a mint, and its aim is not to get rich. It is to make you doubt the note in your own pocket. And now, the part these videos skip. Everything so far has been told from inside the trade, the paper, the press, the passing, which is how this subject is almost always told. So it is worth being exact about what counterfeiting actually is when you step back from it, because the picture is not the one the trade flatters itself with. The first thing is that it barely works as a share of the money in the world. Against the total quantity of genuine notes in circulation, the amount of successful counterfeit is tiny, and central banks treat it as a nuisance, not a threat. Because they hold a weapon the forger cannot answer, they can redesign the note. Every few years, the money in your pocket changes. New features, new materials, new colors, a whole new series. And every redesign turns the forger's hard-won plates and substrate into scrap overnight. You are copying a target that is allowed to move, and the people who move it never have to catch you to beat you. They only have to change the thing you copied. The second thing is who actually carries the loss, and it is worth saying plainly because the trade never does. A central bank does not refund a fake. The system is built so that the loss stops wherever it is discovered, which means it falls on the last person to accept the note in good faith. The corner shop, the market trader, the taxi driver, the person given it in change and left holding it. Counterfeiting is often described as a crime against the state. In its everyday form, it is almost the opposite. It is a crime against whichever ordinary person happens to be holding the paper at the moment the truth arrives. The third thing is that the whole physical trade is quietly dying, for the same reason bank robbery is dying, because the money moved. Why fake a note that must be printed, transported, and passed one hand at a time? When the same effort spent on a screen can drain an account with no object at all, the modern counterfeit is not a banknote. It is a cloned card, a spoofed page, a fraudulent transfer, value invented and moved with no ink, no paper, and no need to fool a cashier's fingertips. The man with the press is doing the hard, low-margin version of a crime that has gone digital. That is not an argument that the note is safe. It is the reason the note keeps being redesigned, and the reason the real fight over fake money left the workshop a long time ago. Level 9, the exposure. Something surfaces, and it is almost never the printing that gives you away. It is the note failing somewhere down the line in a way that starts a thread. A cashier's pen leaves the wrong mark, and a manager sets the note aside. A counting machine at a bank rejects a bundle, and a serial number is logged. Two notes turn up with the same serial number in the same city, which real notes never do, and now there is a batch to trace. A single passer is caught with a bad 20 and, frightened, starts describing where he bought a stack of them. And your own supply chain betrays you as surely as your product does. You had to buy things, a particular ink, a foil, a press, quantities of a paper that behaves oddly, and every one of those purchases sat in somebody's record. You had to move money, and it moved through a rail that remembers. You had to trust a passer, a buyer, a courier, a partner, and the whole structure holds only as long as the most frightened person in it stays quiet, which is never as long as you need. The charge, when it comes, is rarely just the forgery. It is possession of counterfeit with intent. It is conspiracy. It is fraud. It is money laundering. The offenses that attach to the paperwork and the passing and the proceeds, because those are the parts that can be proved. You built a thing designed to look real. The trail you left building it is the part that was always real, and it is the part that convicts you. That is the lesson of level 9. The forgery is caught not when the picture fails, but when the note re-enters the system that made the original, a bank, a machine, a serial number, and the system reads its own document and knows it did not write it. Level 10. What the top actually is. Here is what happened to the people who reached it. Some were caught early, at the passing end, holding fakes in a shop with a suspicious assistant, and were sentenced for the exposed, low-paid work of putting paper into a till, the most visible people in the trade and the easiest to reach. Some were the printers, found through their supplies or their sellers, and were charged with the whole structure. Because the person who made the notes is the person a court can attach everything to. The plates are enough. You do not have to be caught spending a single one. Some ran the online listings and were traced through the ledger they were promised was private, arrested on the strength of a record they never controlled, in a case built patiently out of transactions they thought had disappeared. Some were protected, for a while, because they were working for a state, and a state's protection is a use, not a loyalty, and uses end. When the arrangement stopped being convenient, the protection was not withdrawn dramatically. A door simply did not open the next time. And the central banks, against whom all of this was supposedly aimed, absorbed it, redesigned around it, and carried on. The money in your pocket has already changed since the best forgers of a generation ago perfected the last version, and their perfect notes are now worthless in a way even they are not, because the thing they copied no longer exists. So look back at the 31-year-old holding a note up to a window, seeing it clearly for the first time. He thought he was looking at a picture he could copy. He was looking at a security document built by a state, on materials he could not buy, with a machine he could not own, carrying features he could not make, that the state was free to redesign the moment he got close. Every level after that was a slow discovery that the printing was never the problem, that the note was engineered from the paper up so that copying the image would leave him with everything hard still to do and a trail behind him the whole way. At the bottom, a passer handing a fake across a counter for real change, carrying all the risk for the smallest cut. In the middle, a printer whose plates are enough to convict him whether he spent a note or not. Near the top, a state doing it flawlessly for reasons that have nothing to do with money at all. And underneath all of it, an ordinary person somewhere holding the last bad note, eating a loss no one will ever refund. If this changed how you think about the money in your pocket, share it. Subscribe if you are new here.